Hello, I'm Ethan Schmidt with DevilsDigest.com, and I'm joined alongside our publisher, Hod Rabino, to discuss ASU's February signing day. Now, the Sun Devils are currently 24 in the Rivals rankings, and Hod, ASU signs two players today, quarterback Dalen McLemore and tight end Jake Ray. It also announced the signings of grad transfer offensive lineman Kellen Deesh and Henry Haddis. Now, Hod, what do all of these players add to the table for the Sun Devils?
Well, we'll start with the grad transfers first. Obviously, Arizona State is losing several seniors on the offensive line from last year's team, and instead of trying to rely more and more on underclassmen, as we all know, at all times there were two freshmen, or I should say maybe for the most of the season, two freshmen starting on the offensive line. Arizona State wanted to try and avoid that scenario again in 2020. So really what they did, they shored up the left side of the line, if you will. Kellen Deesh projected at left tackle, Henry Haddis projected at left guard, and they feel that they're really able to solidify the blind side of the quarterback with those two players. Herm Edwards said again and again, when you go to spring practice, just watch Kellen Deesh, 6'7", over 300 pounds. So
He's a monster.
Absolutely a monster. And granted, look, it's not only they have to look good coming off the bus. You also have to play well. With Arizona State, when it comes to Deesh, this is one player that they've been targeting for quite a while. Comes from Texas A&M. They're able to get him through the transfer portal. Henry Addis comes from Stanford, and I think there's always sometimes that comfort level when you get a player from the Pac-12. Sometimes there's really less transition involved, if you will. Henry Addis, ironically, was recruited by the previous coaching regime over here at Arizona State, so there is maybe some sense of comfort of being familiar with the program and whatnot. So Arizona State is really happy they're able to get those two offensive linemen. They bring experience, and they really can shore up the left side of the offensive line. When you look at the quarterback, Dalen McLemore, look, when you try to land a quarterback this late in the process, as we know, the February signing day is really anticlimactic now that they have the early signing period in December. And Dalen McLemore is really one of those quarterbacks that fell into your lap because did not play much at all as a junior, really a late bloomer, and missed 6 weeks as a senior with a broken collarbone. So there really wasn't that much film on him. Oh, by the way, he played for a high school that is somewhat a rarity, that all their games were on Saturdays. He can't take official visits. Coaches can't watch him on Saturdays. So he's somebody that really went under the radar quite a bit, but he played for a 13-2 team in Sarah up in San Mateo, California, up in Northern California. They were the runner-up in the California championship game. So he's a player that really brings a lot of experience, really has a lot of similarities to Jaden Daniels. Offensive coordinator Zach Hill talked about it in the press conference, and really as a backup quarterback that can learn a lot from Jaden Daniels and maybe be the starter one day. And by the way, let's just put it out there, that one day is going to be after the 2021 season. I totally expect Jaden Daniels to declare to the NFL draft after he played here at Arizona State for 3 years. But nonetheless, McLemore has at least a good 2 years, to really learn from Jaden Daniels. He really possesses a lot of that skill sets that Daniels possessed, and I think that really would be a good pickup for Arizona State in the long run. And then you have Jake Ray, the tight end, and we all knew that Zach Hill, the offensive coordinator, when he ran so many multiple tight end sets at Boise State, he wanted depth for this tight end group. I won't be surprised if they try to get another tight end grad transfer maybe between now and fall camp. But Jake Ray is somebody who played for Fort Lauderdale St. Thomas Aquinas, the top high school program in Florida, ranked number 5 nationally, 6'4", 240. So really physically, it's not like he's really going to have to add a lot of pounds or anything like that to his frame. Somebody that, besides having a really good blocking body, if you will, somebody that really can go out there in space and really also be a contributor in the passing game. So really, when you get players this late in the process, you don't always get the cream of the crop, but I think Arizona State was able to hit both the needs and quality of each and every player quite well in this February signing period.
Definitely, and those grad transfers are going to shore up the offensive line for Arizona State. And now that the 2020 class, in terms of sign players, is complete, how well do you think the Sun Devils address their various needs?
Well, let's talk about the other positions we haven't talked about earlier. When you look at running back, obviously not only you lose Zeno Benjamin, but you really don't have a lot of experience over there at that position. And now you're bringing two true freshmen who, by the way, are already on campus here as early enrollees. Really a little thunder and lightning combination, if you will. The thunder, the more physical running back, is DeMonte Trainum from Ohio. The lightning, the scat back, if you will, is Daniel Nada from Folsom, California. Both of them 4-star prospects. And when you talk about shoring the offensive line, I think that even becomes even more paramount when you have inexperienced running backs that are really going to need every little gap to run through until they really can get all the secrets of the trade, if you will, on how to be an effective running back at the college football level, at the Pac-12 level. To boot. But I think that in terms of running back, you definitely really elevated the talent that now is left on this team after Benjamin departed. And look, I mean, I wouldn't totally discount the players that are still here. I mean, I thought the guy like Demetrius Flowers, who redshirted in 2019, really didn't get a lot of chances at all during the season. In the Sun Bowl, sure. I think he showed us. I think he showed some flashes. So you never know if some of those overlooked players that are returning players sometime emerge in spring practice and fall camp. But I think as a running back, I really like those two freshman additions. When we look at the wide receiver group, it's just amazing that Arizona State landed all these wide receivers. All of them are 4-star prospects. All of them from the state of California. Chad Johnson, Elijah Badger, Elvie Bunkley-Shelton, and Johnny Wilson. And Johnny Wilson is actually a former Oregon commit that might actually be here in March for the second portion of spring practice, and that's huge. We always talk about the benefit of an early enrollee coming here for spring practice. It's something you really cannot even put a price tag on it. The acclamation on the field, off the field. So if Johnny Wilson can make it over here for the second part of spring practice, because the other wide receivers are only going to come here in the summer, I think that's going to be crucial for the Sun Devils. But really a lot of talent over there. You're losing Brandon Ayuk, you're losing Kyle Williams. Yes, you still have Frank Darby, but Frank Darby really needs a lot of help around him. And I think when you land 4-star wide receivers, I like to think that the majority of those players are going to be able to contribute and really hit the ground running as true freshmen. When you look on the other side of the ball, I really like the two defensive linemen that they signed, Joe Moore and Omar Norman Lott. Omar Norman Lott, I think, could be maybe the best player in this recruiting class, or at least in the top 3, because he can play both inside and outside on the line. We know this defensive line really needs a lot of work. I feel very good about what Arizona State is returning at linebacker and in the secondary, but I feel that a guy like Omar Norman Lott has to be a difference maker from day one on that defensive line, and I think he definitely has all the tools to do that. Joe Moore from St. Louis, he's somebody that is maybe more of a classic defensive end. We know quarterback pressure was a huge issue in 2019, and I really think when you look at a passing defense that was ranked 115th among all FBS schools, not to say that there weren't issues at the secondary, obviously they were, but obviously the lack of pass rushing really hurt that group. And I think with this two new defensive linemen and some of the players that are coming back that redshirted last year, Mary Johnson, Stephon Wright, I think this defensive line is primed to play better than they did in 2019. How much better obviously remains to be seen. I love what they did at linebacker. Jordan Banks, a 4-star linebacker from Southern California, somebody who was coveted not only in Pac-12 country, but really from coast to coast, to get him to play in theory next to Merle Robinson, next to Darren Butler, with Tyler Johnson no longer on the team due to medical retirement. I think that is a huge part of this defense.
Oh yeah.
And then you got somebody like Caleb McCullough, also from Southern California, somewhat overlooked because he played in Oxnard, Southern California, and I'm sure like half the people that are watching this video right now would have to Google where Oxnard, Southern California is. But his high school Pacifica did win a state championship in their division. So again, when you talk about players that do come from championship teams, whether they won the championship or at least a runner-up, Caleb McCullough is definitely one of those linebackers, which somewhat overlooked, I think, by a lot of Pac-12 teams. I think teams like UCLA and USC came much later than Arizona State is, and he rewarded them for their loyalty. When you look at the secondary, I really love DJ Taylor from Tampa, another player that's already an early enrollee. I think he's somebody that can really make an impact on that defensive backfield. backfield. So that's another player I would look for. I think one player that's really going under the radar, Edward Woods from Oakland. He actually played against Kelly McCullough in the California championship game, and he's somebody that also has really a bright future ahead of them. So really, I think in terms of getting needs and getting quality, just we talked about the 4 players that signed after December. I think when you talk about all the players that signed in December signing period, there really is a lot of talent addressing a lot of needs for this Arizona State team.
Switching gears now, in light of the changes at defensive coordinator, Herm Edwards' press conference along with AP and Al, recruiting wasn't the only thing that was addressed. And what did you think those gentlemen had to say on the subject?
Well, I think we don't have really a clear picture, and maybe even Antonio Pierce and Marvin Lewis haven't divvied up the duties quite yet. And that's something that is really going to be work in progress. I mean, they're going to go for the first time ever in spring practice in less than 3 weeks as co-defensive coordinator. And obviously, in theory, you can make a division of duties flow chart, if you will, but at the end of the day, until the rubber meets the road, you don't know how it's all going to materialize. But Antonio Pierce feels very comfortable working with Marvin Lewis because, after all, he said that Marvin Lewis was his defensive coordinator at the Washington Redskins.
Yep.
Antonio Pierce admitted that a lot of the drills that he runs for his linebacker group are drills that he went through under Marvin Lewis back in the day with the Redskins. So now, for him to be coaching side by side with really somebody I guess you would call a mentor, Antonio Pierce said, absolutely, this is a fantasy. This is something that comes true and really is going to make him a better coach that much more. And Marvin Lewis, I mean, what else can you say when you talk about so much NFL experience on his side, now being a co-defensive coordinator. And look, I mean, I know some people kind of roll their eyes when we talk about the pro model and how much Arizona State is trying to mimic an NFL program. But trust me, guys, when you're ranked top 25 in your recruiting class, this is something that's resonating with recruits. If recruits really do want to make it to the NFL, when you have Herm Edwards, when you have Marvin Lewis, not an advisor anymore, a coach on the field, a coach that's out there recruiting, when you have Antonio Pierce, let alone guys like Derek Hagan, Kevin Mawai, those are factors that really matter to the recruits that have their eyes set already on the NFL, have their eyes set on the NFL ever since they started playing football. So just having those two co-defensive coordinators, I think, is really going to enhance Arizona State's recruiting abilities, and I don't think there's going to be any lack of experience, if you will, at all at that position. The big question is, how much are we going to see the 3-3-5? Is it really just gone by the wayside now that both Danny Gonzalez and Tony White are no longer on the staff? Are we still going to see some relics of it here and there? I think we all know, and we talked about this a lot, and also have an article on our front page at DevilsDigest.com delving a little more in depth into that. A lot of the four-man fronts we saw in the Sun Bowl, definitely the same fronts we should expect to see in spring practice, let alone in the 2020 season. I think that even though Tony White was the defensive coordinator in that bowl game, and I think he even said so in an interview after he left for Syracuse, that Marvin Lewis and Antonio Pierce's fingerprints were there quite a bit on the defense that Arizona State ran against Florida State. So I think that this defense is not going to look like a pure 3-3-5 by any means, but I think it still take the positive elements, the more effective elements, if you will, from that and incorporate it into what Marvin Lewis and Antonio Pierce want to do. And Herm Edwards did not offer any tips on what the defense is going to look like. I said, you're going to see after the first game. So we'll wait and see. But I think the framework right now for this Arizona State defense works really well. You have experience at coaching, and I think you have a lot of experience in the linebacker and secondary. If they can figure out the defensive line, and I think the defensive line is something that may be figured out more maybe in fall camp compared to spring practice. But I really think this defense can really take that step forward in 2020.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely see more of a mixture on the defensive front as far as scheme. And, Marvin Lewis and AP, they're smart football guys. I think they'll be able to get along just fine. And now, Hod, spring football is just 3 weeks away. Just what are some of the major storylines headed into spring practice?
Well, I think when we talk about a lot of experience on defense, again, not so much talking about the defensive line, but definitely a lot of experience in linebacker and secondary. When you look at the offense, a lot of inexperience at skill players. And on the offensive line, you're still going to have some underclassmen. And granted, Donovan West and Ladarius Henderson are are now sophomores to be that played a lot in 2019, but they're still underclassmen. So I'm really curious to see how their development from freshman to sophomore does take place. The running backs, I think there's going to be a huge microscope on those guys, and when you look at the wide receiver group, how much of the load can some of the returning players take off Frank Darby? And again, I think maybe it's kind of a bummer that all these four-star wide receivers, at least 3 of them for sure, are not going to be here for spring practice. But now you got some of the returning players, Jordan Curley, Jordan Porter, Ricky Purcell, that really have a chance to establish themselves before all these talented young bucks arrive here in the summer. So not that I'm not looking at the defense on spring practice, but I really think the offense is what a lot of people are going to have their attention turned to. I think really on defense, again, you're really going to look at the defensive line. We mentioned players like Amiri Johnson, Stephon Wright. How much improved have they been after a redshirt year to really take that next step? A guy like Jermaine Lule, who I thought maybe someone on the radar, had an excellent sophomore season. Can he now, as a junior, really be the leader of the group? That's another thing I'm going to look at. And I know special teams is something that we don't talk about unless they screw up. But now, life after Michael Turk at punter, I know they're going to look at a lot of returning players, walk-ons, to see who actually can assume the duties. So maybe somewhat under the radar, but I think to see how much of a step back, if any, Arizona State is going to take in the punting game, that's another thing I'm going to look at spring practice. I really think there's going to be a lot of excitement. There are going to be 10 newcomers in spring practice when it starts on under 3 weeks, and I think that's always exciting to see those really young players, or even a grad transfer like Kellen Deesh, how they perform from day one in spring practice. And sometimes at the end of spring practice, you get a pretty good picture of what 2020 is going to look like. Sometimes it can be a total opposite, for good or for bad. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see how all those young faces are able to establish themselves in the 2 deep. And again, a lot of returning players that have been patiently waiting their turn, how much they can establish themselves where they can really maybe hold off some of the talents that are going to arrive here in the summer. I think it's going to be a really fun 15 sessions for the Sun Devils starting here in less than 3 weeks.
Well, a lot of storylines, as you heard here. Thank you, Hod, for your insight. And for all of your ASU football, basketball, baseball, and hockey coverage, keep it locked on DevilsDigest.com. And for Hod Rabino, I'm Ethan Schmidt. Thanks for watching.